morning. I'd like to welcome you to a press conference to talk about some of the initiatives and some of the things we've undertaken here as a government and as a multifaceted group of partners to deal with a rise in heroin here in our community. This brings together a broad spectrum of stakeholders throughout various facets of the prevention, education, treatment, and enforcement topics. Before I introduce Mayor Jim Gray this morning, I'd like to acknowledge the agencies represented here today. Police Chief Ronnie Bastin, Sheriff Kathy Witt, Director of Community Corrections Rodney Ballard, Dr. Ryan Stanton, Lexington's Fire and Emergency Services Medical Director, Sharon Tankersley and Michelle McCarthy with the Mayor's Alliance on Substance Abuse, Jessica Cobb from the Fayette County Health Department, Dr. Rice Leach from the Fayette County Health Department is not here. He was here earlier for a meeting. Greg Hiles with the Health Department, the Fayette County Attorney's Office through Larry Roberts, and Ray Larson with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Both of those gentlemen could not be here, but their offices have been deeply involved in this throughout this process. So without further ado, I'll introduce Mayor Jim Gray.
Clay, Mr. Commissioner, thank you. Good morning and thanks to all of you for being here. We are here today to discuss a serious problem in Lexington, but one that we are tackling together. Like many cities across America, Lexington has seen a rise in heroin abuse. In fact, we had another big bust last night. Lieutenant Blakely has given me the numbers. I'm going to share with you those numbers, but it illustrates why this task force was formed, and it illustrates that we are having success at it. So these numbers that you see were numbers as of last night. I'm going to change them to this morning's numbers. $77 arrests now. In terms of the total heroin seized, $1,180 grams, and in terms of the street value, instead it's now from $173,000 to $265,000. Okay, so that illustrates that a lot of work is being accomplished. The heroin task force was formed, and as the commissioner just illustrated, it includes representatives from across law enforcement, the court system, health care, and treatment. Now, we're going to illustrate to you shortly the composition and the organization of the task force. They've been meeting and working, not just meeting, but working for the last several months, sharing ways to tackle heroin from all sides. As you'll hear in just a moment, you'll hear about those efforts that are producing these positive results that we saw evidence of just last night. What it illustrates is that good problem solving, effective problem solving, always is about collaboration, about cooperation. It's about a full court press, overwhelming a problem with talent and with a plan, and that's what this has been about. We know that we can't tackle and win this battle on our own. So the partnerships that have been established through this task force are essential and important to making Lexington safer, getting drugs off the street, and people into treatment. So I want to thank all of you for working together and making progress on this tough and challenging issue.
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, we'll turn it over to Chief Ronnie Bastin and Lieutenant Scott Blakely from the Lexington Division of Police.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mayor. As it's already been said, the resurgence of heroin in Lexington is not unique to Lexington. In fact, we're one of the last cities of our size in the region to experience this new phenomenon. Louisville, Cincinnati, and cities all over the United States are seeing the same problems. Around October of last year is when we really started to see heroin come on our radar screen. Prior to that, we hadn't seen it in a number of years. 40 years ago, it was an issue in the community, but it hadn't been for quite some time. Those of us that lived through the times of the high use of heroin are concerned about seeing this resurgence. We remember the 1960s and 70s and just how bad it was, and its horrible impacts this drug had on society from a safety and public health standpoint. It's highly addictive, and as such, people turn to other crimes to fund their habit. Many people wonder, well, why the resurgence of heroin now, after nearly 40 years? Here's our take on it. We think that the resurgence is a symptom of some successes we've had in dealing with other drugs in the community and throughout the United States. For the past 5 to 10 years, lawmakers, police, and community agencies have worked together to diligently battle meth, synthetic drugs like bath salts, and prescription drug abuse. Here in Kentucky, the passage of legislation and targeted enforcement efforts to combat pill mills, doctor shopping, and the purchase of large amounts of pseudoephedrine have worked to slow the use of meth and pills. But that slowdown of those drugs has really paved the way for heroin to re-enter into our society. With the return of heroin, we're facing some serious challenges, such as drug use, drug trafficking, drug overdose, disease transmission, and criminal activity related to the drug addiction. Thankfully, we've been working diligently on these problems, and we've made strides. As the mayor said, drug arrests are being made and intelligence is being gathered to positively impact future drug activity. The Division of Police Narcotics Enforcement Unit has been working hard since October of 2012 to do what they can to keep this emergence of this trend down in Fayette County. They're working hard to combat heroin sales, track the source of the drugs, and take down suppliers. We redoubled our efforts 3 months ago by forming an internal work group and task force by reassigning some additional resources within the Division of Police to specifically target street-level heroin use. And that task force has made some good strides, we think. To talk more about that and to give the details of that effort, I'm going to ask Lieutenant Blakely from our Narcotics Enforcement Unit to step forward and provide those results.
As the Chief has already mentioned, we began seeing the increase in the frequency of our heroin-related investigations in the fall of 2012. At the same time, we noticed a disturbing trend of overdose deaths. And in 2012, we had 22 of our overdose deaths that were related to heroin. That was more than 4 times the amount of the previous year. Likewise, these deaths have continued to happen in the first 6 months of 2013. Out of the 40 overdose deaths reported so far this year, 28 have been from heroin, or 70%. As mentioned, we're not alone in this. We're cooperating with our partners in the cities north of us, and what we have found is many of our dealers come to us from those areas, from Cincinnati, from Cleveland, from Detroit. And yet, why are we seeing this? You know, significant effort has been put in place to reduce the flow of prescription pills, which are also opiate-based. Heroin is also an opiate-based drug, and I think many times it's just being supplanted or replaced. It's initially less expensive, but as that addiction grows, it becomes more and more expensive. Why is it a problem? The heroin we saw in the 60s and 70s was 3 to 7% pure. What we're seeing today is 40 to 50% pure. Because of that, there's other ways for the user to use that other than just needle injections. And some of those images we may all have from the past of someone with a needle in their arm is not necessarily what we see today. This cuts across all spectrums. and we have users from every social and economic group. You know, with that, but as their disease progresses, they will always switch to needle use. And with that comes a risk of communicable diseases. There's no commercial manufacturer of heroin. It's all made illicitly outside the United States and smuggled into our country for sale. We have no control over how pure it might be. It's extremely dangerous for an addict. Our partners from the treatment community have told us that a heroin addict has to get treatment. If they continue to use heroin without intervention, they will die. There is no alternative. It does not matter how experienced of a user you might be, the next dose may be the one that kills you. In an effort to address that, we launched Operation Pandora. We began in earnest back in March, gathering information and intelligence information to identify targets for that investigation to get off the ground hit and running. Even up until last night, we were continuing that effort. We've seen the numbers as they've been presented, including those from last night. In addition to that, we've seized cash, vehicles, firearms, and other assets. Overall, as a division, including all of our officers, in the first 6 months of this year, we've made 148 heroin-related arrests. We have formed a collaborative partnership drawn from a cross-section of the community representing the fields of enforcement, treatment, and education. This group has been working diligently to join together in a combined effort to address the issue. We recognize we simply can't do it alone. Let me be clear. There is a message that we want to send today. If you are an addict and you're addicted to heroin, please get help. Reach out to some of the resources that are available to you. If you're the family member of an addict, we're asking you to stand by them and help them seek that assistance. And make no mistake about it. If you're a dealer and you're preying on the citizens of Lexington and selling heroin, we're not done, and we're coming for you. This coalition of representatives from the fields of enforcement, treatment, and education will stand together. And I'm certain, from what we've witnessed already, that we will have a model program that can be duplicated across the nation.
Thank you, Lieutenant Blakely. That's a very powerful message. I would like to also acknowledge one of the things that he hinted at was a regional approach. And through Larry Roberts' office, Greg Howard has assembled on a regular basis investigators from surrounding communities to come into Lexington to share information about what they're seeing and the people they're seeing and the types of activities. So that's another great initiative that we've embarked upon during this process. At this point, we'll turn over to Battalion Chief Brian Woods, who's in command of the EMS service here in Lexington with the Division of Fire and EMS.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Brian Wood. I'm in charge of the emergency medical services for the city. We've been noticing that the emergency medical runs for the Lexington Fire Department, the volume in regards to the heroin deaths this year have also been mirrored in that effect. Heroin's not a new drug, but it has resurged again, so we do have experience in dealing with it. Through this task force and multiple interagency working relationships, we stand ready and are better able to fight this epidemic. Realize that this resurgence in heroin doesn't affect just the drug user, it affects the whole community. Everyone knows that everyone knows the violence associated with illegal drug use, but you also have to realize that it's especially dangerous to the public, emergency workers in particular, through needle sticks, bloodborne pathogen spread, and the secondary diseases that come along with heroin addiction. Right now, the fire department stands ready with its emergency medical responses and resources to partner with all the agencies you see represented here today to fight this epidemic. And as just a statistic to add to this, as of now, we are Narcan. Everybody here is familiar with that drug. That is our antidote to heroin and all opiate-based drugs. As of today, we're administering 3 to 4 doses of that per day. We've purchased 590 doses this year already. Thank you.
And one thing that could be added to that is in the past few months, there have been about 12 overdose victims whose lives have been saved by the fire department showing up either on an engine that carries a paramedic with Narcan or the ambulance, and saved lives on about a dozen occasions. Dr. Ryan Stanton is our emergency medical director for the ambulance service, and he's going to speak now. He's also an emergency room doctor.
Good morning. All right, got the Narcan. There we go. So I come at this from the viewpoint of the front line of medicine in terms of what we see coming in through EMS and then the emergency rooms. And the law enforcement mentioned that the investigations have gone up since about fall, but in the emergency room, I really saw it about a year ago. We started seeing increases in heroin overdoses coming into the emergency room. People who come in lifeless and with the antidote will quickly come up and recover from it. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of heroin abuse. When you have heroin abuse from the law enforcement standpoint, we're talking about law breaking, we're talking about crimes, those sort of things. But there truly is a huge impact on life when it comes to heroin abuse. An estimated 1.6% of the population has used heroin at some point during their life, estimated in 2011 at 4.6 million people. Of the users of heroin, the average loss of life in terms of years is 18 years. So if anybody uses, they're taking 18 years off their life. Within 5 years of using heroin, 50 to 70% will have hepatitis B, 50 to 80% will have hepatitis C, both of which are untreatable diseases. Soft tissue infections, which we're seeing around the community, increasing not only from heroin abuse, but in general with resistant strains of bacteria such as MRSA, very common, which also results in another frequently fatal disease, endocarditis, which is an infection of the inside of the heart, estimated at 1 to 2% of heroin users per year. Now the Narcan is a wonderful medicine. We're going to be seeing it a lot more. Narcan is a competitive binder for the opiates. It takes the place of the opiates on the opiate receptors within the brain, which will quickly reverse the effects of opiates. So not only can this be life-saving and will save lives, but there are also secondary effects that the people come up when awake. It instantly throws them into a withdrawal syndrome. So they'll have all the effects of opiate withdrawal associated with agitation and even some GI upset. So we have to be aware of that. And so as this comes out with the recent legislation from Frankfurt, we're going to need to have significant educational opportunities out there to make sure the public is aware when to use this, how to use this, and what to expect. But really, this is just an episodic type of intervention. This may be a lifesaver. This is the medical version of a life ring to throw it in, but it's not going to keep the person from drowning, and it's what I appreciate here with this group. They were coming at it from all areas of medicine and all areas of law enforcement, healthcare, and in the community, because what this is going to take is going to take law enforcement to get this off the streets, and more importantly, it's going to take recovery efforts to get these people from drowning, to get them out of the water, and to get them recovered, because as we take things off the street, what we've seen already is all we do is change what people abuse, and until we get the people off the abuse track, we're just going to change one abuse subject for another. Thanks.
Mr. Gary Ginn, our Fayette County Coroner, will speak next.
My office will continue to commit our support to each law enforcement investigation. We're listed as public safety, and that seems a little bit odd, but I am concerned about our community. I'm concerned about the people in our community. So we'll continue to investigate these deaths. We will try to determine the exact cause of death and manner of death in each one of these. We'll do our very best to provide toxicology reports to all these different agencies. Just recently, I had a friend from the past. His son died of a heroin overdose. It was devastating to his family, to his mother, to his father, to his brother. It's devastating to me to know that there are people in our community from all different age brackets that are dying from heroin overdoses. This gentleman was in his early 20s. I wonder what his life could have been and what he might have accomplished if he had not been an heroin overdose and died of that. Heroin is very addictive, as each one of us have told you. It's very difficult to get off of heroin unless there is a good support group. And this gentleman did have a good support group. He had been through many different programs and was on the road to be a better person in our community and a better citizen. He went down the wrong road, and he fell back one more time. With the heroin, has been stated, we don't know what the level is. We don't know how strong it is or how weak it is. This gentleman died very suddenly, and it's very devastating. He did not try to cause his own death, but it was very devastating for his family. It's very devastating for me as a community leader and as an elected official to see these deaths occurring in our community. But we will continue to supply our support to each one of our law enforcement agencies. Throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we have other deaths from other areas that are brought to University of Kentucky as well. I guess the best thing to do is for our news, we would want you to partner with us to be able to get the word out where there is help for our community. I think that's important for that to be published just occasionally so that people know where they can get help, because there are people that do need help, and they are seeking help, is what I'm seeing from a lot of the families that I've talked with, individuals who have died. If there's someone in our community now, I would say that you can contact law enforcement. Our law enforcement will help you get the help that you need. Our office will actually send you in the right direction for people that will help as well, and we'll be more than glad to. Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. At this point, it is appropriate to turn towards the educational and treatment services side of what we've been doing. And throughout this process, it has been one of our main goals to do a couple of things, and that is to educate ourselves first, because this is a resurgence of something that's been around for about 110 years. There's a cycle of heroin in America that comes about every 30 years. And in doing that, this one is different because we have much better treatment options. And to speak to some of the treatment and education options, Sharon Tankersley and Michelle McCarthy from the Mayor's Alliance on Substance Abuse.
I am Sharon Tankersley, and I work with the Mayor's Alliance here in Fayette County. And first, I just want to say that it has been a true honor and privilege to be invited into this work group to work with your local officials on a problem that is growing in this community, to try to get on the front end of this problem in a way that is preventative. Most of the folks that have spoken before you today represent law enforcement, and as a private citizen, many viewers might even have the same presupposition that law enforcement is only concerned with getting criminals off the streets, and if you're using drugs, you're a criminal and you deserve to be in jail. It has been very, very heartwarming as a citizen, as I said, to be part of this group who has made it clear from the beginning that while they are going to go after hardened criminals and drug traffickers who try to bring these poisons into our community and hurt our citizens, they are also very, very much focused on getting information into the hands of citizens about how to get help before the use of heroin becomes another overdose death. And I just have really been impressed by the group that has assembled to try and get the word out to the public about the resources that are available. And they really have a heart for the safety of this community. And that's been first and foremost as we've worked on these projects. And as we go forward from here, our group will be continuing to push information about resource options into the community. And we just encourage every citizen who is in contact with somebody in their lives who they fear might be dealing with some of these issues to seek help sooner rather than later. And don't fear law enforcement. Don't fear your public officials. They're not here to catch you in the act. They're here to try and help you and save you from becoming another statistic. So that is what we're about, and as I said, it's been a privilege.
I'm Michelle McCarthy, and the main message that I would really like for the public to understand is that you really need to educate yourself, equip yourself with the correct information. This is not the heroin of 20, 30 years ago. It's not the image, the stereotypical image you may have in your head of the down and out IV drug user shooting up heroin in a back alley in Baltimore and New York. It has made its way into Kentucky. It is in Lexington, and a lot of the people using it are individuals who were previously addicted to prescription drugs. And because our pill mill legislation has done its job, an unintended consequence is the individuals who have been addicted to the prescription drugs and can no longer access those weren't cured of their addiction when that dried up. They're still looking for something to replace that. And unfortunately, heroin has come into our community, and it's a really cheap alternative. It's extremely dangerous. And so we have individuals who are as young as 14 and as old as in their 50s and 60s who are turning to heroin. And so we need people to understand this is your neighbor, this is your child, this is your coworker, this is one of your loved ones. You need to be educated on just what the dangers are, where to get help, and to understand, as Sharon mentioned, that everybody is working together, that we need the resources from every direction, that it's about law enforcement having the resources and the ability to not just arrest, but to truly prosecute and incarcerate the individuals who are predatory drug dealers. And we need to distinctly separate those individuals from people who may be committing crimes as part of their drug addiction and actually need help and need treatment for their addiction. Those people are the ones that we need to be utilizing our resources in getting them into proper treatment, making sure they are able to get sober and lead a life of recovery and can give back to our community. And on the front end, we really need to be doing the prevention and education for the individuals who maybe aren't even using drugs yet and are tempted, or they've been using prescription drugs and haven't made that transition to heroin, or they've been using by another source and they haven't been injecting yet. We need to be doing prevention along all of those efforts and educating them about the risk of taking that next step. And so we just want everybody to understand that we are doing our best to work together, and I would have to attest to what Sharon said, that this has been one of the most productive and fast-moving groups that I've ever had the privilege to be a part of, that it's really been individuals who are very passionate about making sure we address every single one of these issues in your community and to keep our community safe. Thank you.
With that, we'll open the floor for questions.
Is the danger of heroin that each dose could be a different lethal dose because of the percentage of purity? Is it more for Dr. Stanton?
It would be more for Dr. Stanton, but I can say what I've learned is that's categorically correct.
Yeah, a lot of the issue, one, is the concentration mentioned in terms of the concentration we're seeing are very different. Also, what's in the heroin that's used to cut it can be very different. There can be very dangerous substances in that as well. And also making that transition from prescription pills to something that's more variable. A lot of times they get into it, don't understand it, can hot shot, hitting it with something else or hitting it pretty hard can really overwhelm people. So what we see a lot of times, especially in the emergency department, is not people that are attempting to harm themselves. It's just more of chasing that high or chasing that dragon, trying to get that fix, and the unintended consequence of overdosing.
Is injection the most dangerous way to use it?
It can be, yes. Not only because of the primary effects of how fast it enters the bloodstream, but also the secondary effects of potentially dirty needles, infections, the things I mentioned in terms of endocarditis, hepatitis, all of those things.
From a law enforcement standpoint, what are some of the biggest challenges in attacking the heroin problem here in Lexington?
I think we've addressed those. I think we're working hard on those challenges. We've already brought a group of people together. We realize we can't do it alone, and everybody in this room has become part of the solution. So I think we're well on our way to handling those challenges and making it better for the community.
For the police chief, this sounds quite different from the war on drugs we're used to hearing about. Why is this worthy of such a multifaceted approach?
Well, certainly we've learned that in our problem-solving efforts that we can't do it alone. And this this issue is a big issue. It has many facets and tentacles and places it runs. It requires a multifaceted approach. It requires all of the folks that are here represented and some others that are stakeholders to come together, share information, share resources, and work together as a group to tackle this. It's something we feel like we have to do, and it's already showing some signs of success.
In relation to the arrests yesterday that were made, I think 6 out of Michigan and 2 out of Kentucky, is that correct?
Scott, do you want to address that?
Are you guys
I wanna
looking into
come
a
back to that,
pipeline
too.
from the north?
We don't want to give out too much information. That investigation is still continuing as we speak. A great deal and a large number of those individuals arrested were from out of state.
I want to sandwich on that question about what distinguishes this approach. Our corrections director, Rodney Ballard, routinely tells me what an outstanding leadership we have in our public safety departments throughout our public. That means our divisions, okay? Now, early on I said effective problem solving is all about overwhelming the problem with good talent, and that means leadership. And that means pulling people together. It sounds easy, it almost sounds cliche, but until you have a plan, an organizational plan with a focus and a determination, you don't get these kind of results. And that's what this represents. And that is a big deal.
I'm curious why it's called Operation Pandora.
I'm going to let somebody else on that. I've got to escape.
We actually designed that. If you have any idea about Greek mythology, Pandora was a Greek heroine, and part of opening Pandora's box, so to speak, was all these calamities that was released on the world. But she got the box closed in time to leave hope out, and that's the reason why we chose to name it Operation Pandora.
People said heroin is cheap. How cheap are we talking about?
The market really in Lexington hasn't solidified a firm price. It is cheaper than, for instance, what we see prescription medication being diverted and sold for. But as that addiction progresses, it will meet that level and exceed it because it's a very short-acting drug, and they will use more and more of it, and it will become much more frequent. The average addict will use heroin 5 to 7 times a day, and each one of those hits will probably cost around $35. So,
As far as the percentage of people who use heroin that pass away, that die, what's that percentage look like?
well, as you can see in the numbers in the first 6 months of 2013, our numbers are going up. We've had 40 overdose deaths at all. 28 of them have been from heroin. That's 70%. That's more than double the amount from last year. So it's something that we realize, everybody up here realizes an issue, and that's why we've come together to address it. And as the mayor said, it's a wonderful approach, and I think it's an approach that will be duplicated across the country.
I don't mean a corner classification of accidental death, but the people who die, are they accidentally killing themselves, I guess?
To date, I don't believe that we've had anyone that's intentionally took their own life with the aid of heroin. All the deaths that you see represented here have been, the manner of death has been classified as accidental death, either by heroin or a combination of heroin and other drugs.
Someone mentioned the images that we have in our heads of kind of a user kind of being down and out. Is that not the case, or are they a public safety risk while high, or is it?
Well, when I'm at scene and find people who have died, they come from every facet of life. I mean, it's not your typical person that you find in the back alley. The young gentleman that I talked about earlier, he was on the road to recovery. He had actually rented a place to stay. He had purchased a car. He had a job, but he made he made another mistake. We see older people that are retired. We see young people that aren't veterans of heroin, and they're not sure about how much to use. And even if they think they know what to use, they don't know the dose and how strong or weak it is. So, the image that you have, it could be your grandmother, it could be your uncle, it could be your neighbor, it could be a healthcare profession. There's many different people. So it's not going to be the homeless person that you think is addicted to drugs most of the time. It could be, but the image has definitely changed from 20 and 30 years ago.